Welcome back to Real Horror Stories. I'm here with you guys once again with another real event style horror story that was anonymously shared with me. Whether it's 100% true or not, I'll let you decide. Tonight's story is about a man who accepted a simple overnight job watching an isolated farm for easy money. He thought it would be the easiest $500 he'd ever make. Instead, he experienced something so disturbing that he refused to ever set foot on that property again. So dim the lights, put on your headphones, and stay with me until the very end. Because the final few minutes completely change the meaning of everything you're about to hear. Now let's begin. The police told me they couldn't find any evidence of what I reported. They also suggested I stop telling people this story because it would only encourage trespassers. But if anyone ever offers you easy money to watch an empty farm overnight, say no. Last fall, I was between jobs when a local farmer asked if I could watch his property for one night while he attended a family emergency. He said people had been stealing diesel fuel and equipment. The pay was $500 for one night. The farm sat almost 15 kilometers from the nearest town. There were 2 barns, an old grain bin, and a farmhouse that hadn't been lived in for years. Before leaving, the farmer handed me a flashlight and 1 key. Then he said something strange. If you hear someone walking around the grain bin after midnight, stay inside the shop. I laughed and asked if he was trying to scare me. He didn't answer. By 10 p.m., everything was quiet. I walked around the yard, checked the machinery, locked the gates, and settled into the heated workshop. At exactly 12:18 a.m., the motion light near the grain bin turned on. I looked outside. Nothing. The light shut off. 30 seconds later, it came back on. Still nothing. I grabbed my flashlight and walked halfway across the yard before hearing footsteps on gravel. Crunch, crunch, crunch. They sounded slow and deliberate. I shined my light toward the grain bin. No one was there. Then I noticed something odd. Fresh boot prints in the dust. Only one set. They circled the grain bin 3 times, then stopped. There were no tracks leading away. I returned to the workshop and locked the door. At 1:07 a.m., someone knocked once on the metal wall outside, then twice, then 3 times. Silence. I called the farmer. No answer. I called the local police non-emergency line. The dispatcher suggested it was probably wildlife. As I hung up, every yard light on the property suddenly switched off. The entire farm disappeared into darkness. Only my flashlight worked. Then I heard a truck engine start. I looked toward the machinery shed. One of the old grain trucks had its headlights on. The engine was running. The truck slowly rolled forward. Nobody was in the driver's seat. It stopped by itself after a few meters. I stayed inside until sunrise. The farmer returned around 7 a.m. I told him everything. He didn't ask about the truck. Instead, his first question was, "Did you go near the grain bin?" I said yes. He looked disappointed. Then he walked over to inspect the ground. The boot prints were gone. So were mine. The dirt looked perfectly smooth, as if it had never been disturbed. He asked to see my flashlight. I handed it to him. He turned it over and quietly said, "This isn't mine." I argued that it was the one he'd given me. He shook his head. "The flashlight I gave you was red. The one in my hand was black." I drove home and tried to forget about it. 2 weeks later, I saw the farmer at a hardware store. He acted like we'd never met. When I reminded him about watching his farm, he stared at me and said, "I've lived alone for 23 years. I replied, "I know. You left because of a family emergency." He frowned. "My family's been gone for 23 years. That night, I searched the county archives online. The address matched an article from 2001. A night watchman had disappeared while guarding that same property. The report mentioned only one item recovered, a black flashlight found beside the grain bin. I still have it. The batteries should have died years ago. But every fall, on the same date, at exactly 12:18 a.m., it turns itself on for 3 minutes. And when it does, I can hear footsteps on gravel outside my house. I've been driving long-haul trucks across Canada and the US for nearly 9 years. I've driven through blizzards, wildfires, and highways with no cell service for hours. But there's one stop I will never make again, even if my fuel tank is empty. It happened last winter around 2:30 a.m. while I was hauling produce through northern Saskatchewan. The highway was deserted and snow was starting to fall. My GPS said the next gas station was over 120 kilometers away, but my fuel gauge was lower than I liked. Then I saw it. A bright truck stop with a large neon sign that read, "Open 24 hours. Hot food. Fuel." The strange part was that I'd driven this route dozens of times and had never seen it before. I pulled in anyway. There were about 8 semi-trucks parked outside, but something felt wrong. Every truck was covered with fresh snow, even their windshields. If they had just arrived, the snow couldn't have piled up like that. I walked inside. The diner was spotless. A waitress stood behind the counter without moving. 3 truck drivers sat in booths drinking coffee. None of them spoke. None of them even looked at me. I ordered a coffee. The waitress slid the cup toward me and quietly asked, "Long trip?" I nodded. She leaned closer. "Leave before they finish." I looked around. "Who?" She didn't answer. Instead, she walked into the kitchen and disappeared. I finished my coffee and paid. The receipt had no business name, no address, only the time. 2:43 a.m. back in my truck. I started the engine. Nothing. It wouldn't turn over. I tried again. Still nothing. Then my CB radio crackled. A man's voice said, "Don't leave yet." I grabbed the microphone. No response. When I looked out the windshield, every truck driver from inside the diner was now standing in the parking lot. They were all facing my truck. None of them moved. I locked the doors. A few seconds later, someone knocked once on the passenger side window. I turned my flashlight toward it. No one. Then another knock, this time from the driver's side. Again, nobody. Suddenly, my engine started by itself. I didn't wait. I slammed the truck into gear and drove straight back onto the highway. After about 20 minutes, my GPS signal returned. It immediately announced, "You have been stationary for 6 hours." I checked the dashboard clock. It was 8:51 a.m. I had entered the truck stop shortly after 2:30. I remembered being there for maybe 15 minutes. I pulled into a real gas station farther down the highway and told another driver what had happened. He looked at me and asked, "Did the sign say open 24 hours?" I nodded. His face turned pale. He told me that 20 years earlier, a truck stop had existed near that stretch of highway. One winter night, a propane explosion destroyed the building. Several drivers and employees died before firefighters arrived. The property was demolished, and the highway was rerouted. "There hasn't been a truck stop there in decades," he said. I laughed because I thought he was trying to scare me. Then he asked to see my fuel receipt. I handed it to him. He stared at it for several seconds. The paper was completely blank. No logo, no ink, just one handwritten sentence that neither of us had noticed before. "Thanks for stopping. We'll save you a seat next time." I threw the receipt away and drove home. 3 months later, while cleaning my truck, I found it again, folded neatly inside my logbook. I know I didn't put it there. The handwriting had changed. Now it simply read, "You're overdue."